Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe now for future scary content. And if you're already subscribed, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This channel is nothing without all of you. I want to thank you guys for all the constant support that I receive on a daily and weekly basis. My goal is to blow this channel up into the stratosphere. Help me first by liking this video, as it will perform at a much higher level. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. When I was a kid, I would sleep over at my grandmother's house every weekend. She lived in a nice condo community where everyone was friendly and there was never any trouble. At the time of this event, I was about 13 years old. I was a super tall and skinny boy who loved movies and video games. My grandmother would let me rent games and movies when I stayed over. At the start of one weekend on a Friday, we were arriving back to her place after stopping off to get some groceries and rentals. Anyone remember when you could rent VHS tapes and games from grocery stores? Her neighbor was getting out of her car with her son, who recently started living with her. She was around my grandmother's age, and the son was probably in his late 30s at the time. We would usually give a friendly hello, then head on inside. Not this time. The son noticed my pile of movies and games I had rented that I was carrying in, and he struck up a conversation with me, asking if I played only PS1 or had a PC and other consoles. We chatted for a bit while the adults went inside, and he said he had something for me if I wanted to stop by later. I was a smart kid and didn't like the idea of befriending someone his age. I knew it was inappropriate, so I said, "Sure, maybe," and went into my grandmother's place. An hour went by and I could see out of the window his mom leaving in her car. 2 minutes later, he was knocking on my grandmother's front door. I answered it and he had a box full of computer parts that he said he wanted to give me. Nothing I could use. It was just like broken old flight sticks and graphic cards from the early 90s. It was weird that he just wanted to give me stuff, but then he asked if I wanted to go back to his place and play Resident Evil 3. I declined, thinking I have seen too many movies and know if I ever went to a strange guy's place alone, I probably wasn't leaving alive. He said fine and left. I didn't see him the rest of the night. But Saturday morning he came knocking again, and I was getting creeped out. I told my grandmother to answer the door and to tell him to stop trying to hang out with the kid. She did, and he just started screaming at her. I felt horrible putting her in that position, basically being berated by a guy who more than likely was a pedophile. I mean, he got super defensive about it, then left. A few hours later, his mother came around and was knocking. And then she started yelling at my grandmother for accusing her son of ill intentions. I was just baffled, but was kind of proud to see my grandmother, someone who's lived alone for 20 years at this point, just try to do her best to protect me. Once the guy's mother left, we thought it was over. So at night, as usual, I would set up her couch and make it my bed in her living room. The room with the TV that had the VCR hooked up to it, and I would try to watch as many of the movies I rented on Friday night. There was a big see-through door to her back patio at the end of the couch where my feet would be laid. The door had lots of square windows in it, so she had big red velvet drapes covering the door. People would walk their dogs behind the condo and could see right into her place. She liked her privacy. Well, Saturday night, at around 2:30 a.m., I hear this weird scratching sound coming from the door. I start to freak. I'm thinking this guy is trying to break in, and the moment I open the drapes, I will see him there. Then I come to my senses and try to calm down. I think the probability of him trying to break into the condo is super low, that I'm probably just jumpy from yelling him and his mother were doing earlier. So young, dumb me decides to be brave and open the curtain. There he was trying to pick the lock, and I startled him when I opened the curtains. But did he run? No. The guy pulled out a hammer from his back waistband and just goes for it. He smashes one of the window squares and tries to open the door from the inside. I think quick and kick his hand, and he cuts himself on a piece of glass. He isn't even wearing gloves, so he gets cut up bad and then runs away. I shout to my grandmother to wake up as I go to her kitchen and grab the biggest knife I can find and go back to the back patio to wait in case he comes back. Moments later, I heard the guy speed off in his mom's car, and I could hear her yelling at him to come back. We called the police, and I basically missed school that week because I had to talk to the cops off and on, help my grandmother fix her door, clean up the blood trail he left behind on our patio, and also go to her community town meeting about the incident to talk to them. After that, I stopped visiting her there. I don't know if the cops ever found the guy either. It took my grandmother a few months to move out. She said the car he took off in never showed up again. The guy's mother was basically stranded without a way to get food, so my grandmother would drive her to the store when she went to get her groceries. They would talk very little about the incident, but the mother finally admitted why her son started living with her. He had just gotten out of a mental care facility he was placed in after being caught in his 10-year-old nephew's bed, sleeping next to him, nude. I was 24, female with a 2-year-old son, whose father had relapsed on drugs and got us evicted after blowing through every dime of savings we had. Shamefully, I went back to live at my parents' house while working to get back on my feet. I should add they lived in an upper-middle-class neighborhood on the good side of our city and had lived there for almost 20 years at this point. The night before this incident, I was quite restless and couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs in hopes that watching murder mysteries on the living room TV would lull me to a dream. My father, always a worrier, double-checked all the windows, locks, and ensured the garage door was closed, as he did every night. My mother and siblings would often tease him of this, since we felt extremely safe and comfortable in that neighborhood. He went to bed, and I ended up falling asleep on the couch. I was awoken the next morning to the sounds of my father in the kitchen, preparing to leave for work. I got myself and son dressed and prepared to depart for work as well. My father proceeded to head to his car in the garage and noticed that the garage door was fully opened. Frustrated, he turned to me, told me to always be sure the garage door is down. I figured he must have forgotten to check it the night before, and I shrugged it off. Since my parents utilized the garage to park their 2 vehicles, I had to park my car in the street at the end of the curved driveway. There was little visibility of my car from the garage entrance. I pick up my son and head out the door to go to work. As I am approaching my car, I notice a person is sitting in the driver's seat of my vehicle. I will add that I often left my car open in case my son's now homeless father needed shelter from the rain or cold. He could lay in there. Of course, I naturally think it's him. I open the passenger side door and lean in, expecting him to welcome me and beg me for a ride somewhere. Instead, I see a very large and rough-looking man startle awake and stare blankly at me. In shock, I tell him to get the hell out of my car. He then tells me it's his car and to get in so he can give me a ride. Still holding my son, I start to scream at the man, who proceeded to move across the front as if to grab me. At this time, a neighbor is coming down my street in their vehicle, presumably on their way to work. I hail him down, point to the man, and tell him to call the police, to which he does. I finally came to my senses and realized I needed to get my son away from this situation, so I retreat back inside the house and wait for the cops to arrive. The man must have come to his senses as the cops were being called, because he ended up fleeing the car and crossing through some property to a parallel street. The cops arrive and were unable to locate him, following the direction he went. They were then notified on radio that a car had just been stolen from a neighbor on that street. There's our guy. They end up locating him inside the vehicle a few miles away and apprehend him. Now, finding a strange man in your car is certainly odd, but here's where the story gets creepier. The police discovered several items on the man that were stolen from various homes. They also knew of him from historical arrests, inclusive of drug and rape convictions. During questioning, the man revealed he was working with 2 accomplices, and they were essentially going house to house and stealing from unlocked cars. The man stated the other 2 men had split away from him, and he proceeded to get into my unlocked car where he passed out until found. Remember how the garage door was open the morning of, thus pissing my father off? I had a push-button garage opener on the car visor. The man opened the garage intending to come inside the house. The couch I was sleeping on was only 10 feet maximum from the door that led out to the garage. Who knows how the events would have unfolded if he didn't pass out and made it into my house. Lesson learned: don't date guys that need you to leave their car unlocked for shelter. So this is going to be hard for 2 reasons. I've never talked about this with anyone before. This thing that happened was the worst event of my life, so it's a bit complicated. All of this was very quick and I still have no idea what happened. Anyway, my name is Matthew. I'm 16 years old and I live in Italy. My house is in a little village in the mountains near the Mont Blanc, the biggest mountain in Europe. Unless to say there isn't much activity around here during the day. The event took place last April. I just got out of school after a 2-hour-long Latin test, and I was basically already sleeping at that point. I unlocked my bike, waved at my friends, and left taking the main road that led to the village I live in. As always, there were no cars, no people, no nothing. I was tired, and while riding, I was thinking about the usual things a 15-year-old thinks about when coming back from school. The should I do homework first or video games kind of stuff. I was probably overthinking and kept going along the road while listening, without realizing I didn't take the right turn. I noticed my mistake a few minutes later, and thought, never mind, I'll just take the long way, because at the end of the road you could take a path that led to the village. I didn't know that yet, but that was probably the worst mistake I've ever made in my entire life. I kept going, and at that point the road was going through a little forest. All of the trees above me were stopping the already small amount of sunlight that there was, so it was basically dark outside. I turned on the bike's flashlight and moved on the right side of the road. Everything was quiet until I heard a car sound coming towards me. I was a bit surprised because, as I already said, there was basically no car activity in the area, specifically at that time of day. I did not panic. After all, it was just a car passing by. After a while, I saw the headlights approaching from the road. The car was still pretty far away and going at a slow pace, like if the driver was looking for something. Then, the car sped up, and at my surprise, turned right to get right in front of me. Confused and not wanting to get hit by the vehicle, I turned left to bring the bike on the other side of the road. The car did the same and sped up even more. I had very little time to realize what was happening because the car was coming at full speeds toward me and I was about to get hit. So I did the first thing that came in my mind and jumped off the bike on the right side of the road. I did that just in time because the car ran over the empty bike just a few seconds after I jumped. I sat on the asphalt, my knees and elbows burning from the fall, trying to realize what just happened when I saw the driver of the car getting out of the vehicle that was now still on the side of the road, running towards me without saying a word. I got up as fast as I could, but the guy managed to grab my left arm. I screamed, turned around and landed the strongest punch I could possibly take on the man's nose. The guy didn't flinch or let go of my arm while his nose was pouring blood. The man smiled at me before running back into his car, starting the engine, and leaving. I was in complete shock. I grabbed what was left of my bike and ran home as fast as I could. I was so scared that I left my backpack in the middle of the road and went to get it the next day. That's it. I never knew who this guy was and why he tried to run me over with his car. This is my biggest and only traumatic event that I've experienced in most of my life. I can tell you, I will never take that road again. Thank you for watching this video until the very end. Much respect and love for that. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel for future content, my friends, and go ahead and leave a like on the video as well. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. A link to my email is in the description box below as well. Have a happy, safe rest of your weekend. Till we meet again, stay sinful.